Thank you for joining us today. We have quite a few people joining us from different areas of the province, so we're so glad to be able to present this webinar today on preventing serious injury. So we're going to have a little bit of variety for you this morning. John Morgan, who's an OHS consultant from ServiceNL, he will be presenting part of this webinar. Deanne Feltham-Scott, who's our Health and Safety Program Development Coordinator, she will be presenting as well toward the end. And I'll be presenting. My name is Jamie Edison, and I'm the OHS Business Systems Lead here at WorkplaceNL. So we are WorkplaceNL. We've changed our name probably about a year and a half ago. We serve approximately 13,000 injured workers and more than 19,000 employers. WorkplaceNL is an employer-funded, no-fault insurance system that promotes safe and healthy workplaces, provides return-to-work programs, and offers fair compensation to injured workers and their dependents. We make up the Prevention Services Department. And Prevention Services is made up of a group of health and safety professionals that focus on promoting health and safety education and awareness in respect to OHS. When we promote that to employers and to employees throughout our province. We provide a number of different services. Some of these include working with employers with high claims, high costs, and help them to reduce injuries at their workplaces. We provide statistics on employer performance and other measures of safety. We are involved in developing OHS resources, publications, and workshops and webinars for workplaces. We also are involved in developing training standards, approving training programs for certification, and certifying persons who meet the standards. We assist occupational health and safety committees, worker health and safety representatives, and designates and help them to increase the effectiveness of their duties. As well, we provide a direction to employers for prevention of occupational disease and musculoskeletal injuries. So before we get into what we're really here to talk about, we'll just cover some housekeeping items. We try to make sure that everybody is, getting a chance to move around during the hour and a half that we have for this webinar. So approximately every 30 minutes, we'll just ask that you stand, just stretch a little bit. This gives your body the opportunity to change postures, get the blood moving. Keep your stretches simple. Don't overexert yourself in any way. We encourage you to ask questions. Again, any questions that you may have, type them into your chat window, and we hope to get to them at the end of the presentation. If you could provide a little detail as to the slide that you're questioning something on, that would help us. If we do run out of time, and we do have a pretty full presentation this morning, but if we do run out of time, we will attempt to answer your questions in an email. We will also be using polls this morning. So in a couple of different places, we will be asking some questions, and we just ask that you, just join in and respond to those questions, and then we'll be able to share the results with you. There will also be an evaluation at the end of this presentation. So when you sign out, you should get an email, and we'd encourage you to complete that evaluation, send back to us. Your feedback will help us to develop better, more meaningful workshops and webinars. It's also an opportunity for you to list any future topics that you would like to us to cover in our workshops or webinars. So I'd like to get you involved right away, if we could. What is one thing you would like to take away from this webinar today? So we're presenting on preventing serious injury. Type your your responses in the chat box there, and we'll have a look. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind just doing that, and we'll just see what we get back. Okay, we're starting to get a few responses. So looking at comments like best practices for injury prevention, how to make sure our workers go home safe at the end of the day, what is my role as a manager in preventing injury, tips on how to prevent serious injuries in the workplace, safe work practices, gain more knowledge on serious injury as a whole, how to effectively communicate the importance of prevention to employees. So some of these topics we may cover, others may be a little beyond the scope of what we're looking at today. But we will certainly have a variety of things ready for you through this presentation. All right, so if we want to look at what we're going to cover today, this may help you determine what it is that we're actually going to cover. So we're going to look at the legislative requirements and OHS Division's role in serious injury. As well, we're going to look at the definition of serious injury that OHS Division uses, as well as our definition here at WorkplaceNL for statistical purposes. We're going to cover reporting serious injury and investigating the incident. So that includes what happens after a report of serious injury is made, incident investigation requirements for serious injury, follow-up that may occur after a serious injury is reported or investigated. And we'll also look at some examples of atypical serious injuries to give an idea for employers of what they need to report. We'll look at some serious injury statistics and consequences of serious injury, and then we'll round out the presentation with some ideas of how to prevent serious injury through education and training. So I'm going to turn the presentation over now to John Morgan from OHS Division, and he's going to take you through a number of things here.
Hello everyone. As was mentioned, my name is John Morgan and I'm a Provincial Occupational Health and Safety Officer. I work with the Occupational Health and Safety Division of Service Newfoundland Labrador, and we're a division of the Government of Newfoundland Labrador. Our role is to enforce the Occupational Health and Safety Act, the Occupational Health and Safety General regulations under that Act, as well as the asbestos regulations, the Occupational Health and Safety First Aid regulations, the WHMIS regulations, and the Radiation Health and Safety Act and the regulations under that Act as well. All these pieces of legislation can be accessed through the web. Your best source is through using the link that's detailed. That's a link to the legislation library under the House of Assembly portion of the provincial government website. Anybody can access those documents. They're in searchable PDF format, and they can be downloaded and saved or printed, whatever you should choose. So with respect to the key requirements as detailed under the occupational health and safety legislation that pertain to serious accidents, we'll start off with Section 26 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act to just give you a little bit of an understanding of the role and function of the division that I work with when it comes to serious accidents. Occupational health and safety officers may, under the authority of Section 26, enter and inspect any workplace without prior notification. We may require the production of documents, examine them, and remove them for the purposes of copying. We may conduct tests and take photographs or recordings, which include video recordings of work processes, and activities. We may also, under Section 26, inspect and take samples of a product, tool, appliance, piece of equipment, things produced, used, or present in a workplace. We also conduct investigation to determine the cause and the specifics of work-related accidents or illness. And we have the authority to compel the attendance of witnesses and take evidence from them under oath or affirmation. So under Section 54 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it sets out that where an accident takes place at a workplace that results in serious injury to a worker or death, or that has or continues to have the reasonable possibility or potential of causing serious injury or death, the employer or principal contractor must immediately notify the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for the Occupational Health and Safety Division that that incident has occurred. Those notifications can be made by calling the number identified there on the screen. That line is staffed 24/7. You will actually get to speak to a manager with the Occupational Health and Safety Division who will confirm key details. However, please bear in mind that legislation creates a clear responsibility that serious accidents must be reported as soon as possible. In making the report, it's necessary to provide the name and number of injured, a brief description of the injuries that have resulted, the location where the accident occurred, incident-related key contact information so that we may follow up on the matter, and a brief summary of what has occurred, including what was the work that was being done and the equipment, tools, or materials or work processes that were involved. Also under Section 54, where an accident is reported to the Occupational Health and Safety Division, notification must be made by the employer to the Occupational Health and Safety Committee, the Worker Health and Safety Representative, or the Workplace Health and Safety Designate responsible for that work site where the work occurred, or the workers that were injured or involved in the incident. Section 54 goes on to detail what types of injuries meet the classification of serious injuries that need to be reported. Under subsection A, it details fractures of the skull, spine, pelvis, femur, and the long bones of the upper and lower arm, as well as the upper and lower leg. Amputation of a major part of the hand or the foot, which would include amputation of fingers. Loss of sight of an eye. Serious internal bleeding, burns that require medical attention, and injuries caused directly or indirectly by explosives. Section 54 goes on to detail that serious injuries include asphyxiation or poisoning by gas, which would also include oxygen-deficient atmospheres, that would result in partial or total loss of physical control, or another injury likely to endanger, cause, or permanent injury. There is an exclusion there at the end of Section 54 that serious injuries, as defined by this legislation, does not include injuries to a worker of a nature that may be treated through first aid or medical treatment, and the worker is able to return to his or her work immediately after the treatment or at the end of their next scheduled shift. I will point out that oftentimes people misunderstand the implication or context of that exclusionary clause. This is why we refer people back to Section 54, subsection 1B. You also need to bear in mind those incidents that had or continue to have the reasonable probability of resulting in serious injury, disability, or death of a person. If it meets that criteria, it does need to be reported. That criteria overrules some exemptions. The best advice to provide is, if you're not sure if something meets the criteria or not, call, discuss the matter with the manager taking call, and they will identify if it meets a criteria and what actions you need to take. If in doubt, don't ignore it. Under Section 55, also of the OHS Act, except as directed by the Assistant Deputy Minister or an officer, a person is not to disturb the scene where a serious workplace accident has occurred, except as necessary to provide emergency care for ill or injured persons, or to take necessary measures for the deceased, to take immediate and appropriate action to prevent further injuries, and to take emergency measures to prevent further damage or destruction of property. Otherwise, you are not to do anything to disturb a serious accident scene unless you've been authorized by the OHS Division to do so. Under Section 56 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, the Assistant Deputy Minister or the officer shall, if deemed practicable and appropriate, shall go to the scene where a serious accident that's being reported has occurred, and they will make whatever inquiries that they deem necessary to determine the cause of the accident. Sometimes, given the specifics of the situation, an employer may be directed to conduct an internal accident investigation and to submit a copy of the report to the OHS Division, and it will be the determination will be made based on the results of that report whether an OHS officer will be assigned to go to the scene or to conduct any further investigations or reviews. But that will be clearly identified as to what you need to do by some representative of the OHS Division. Usually that guidance will be provided by the person who takes the report when it's called in, or by the officer that's being assigned the file. Under Section 57 of the OHS Act, a person who witnesses a workplace accident or has information relating to it shall provide the information that an OHS officer requests. And this section is in keeping with other guidance detailed under the Occupational Health and Safety Act that details the obligation to cooperate with an occupational health and safety officer exercising their duties.
Thank you, John. So, that was the OHS Division definition of serious injury. We also use we have a definition here at WorkplaceNL for our statistical purposes. So our definition does incorporate the definition used by OHS Division in that it uses identified nature of injury, type of accident, and source of injury codes that have been identified. So for us, we would deem a claim to be a serious injury if it meets one of the following criteria. So the claimant had an injury in one of the selected National Work Injury Statistic Program codes, and these codes are actually a part of a national coding structure used by all workers' compensation boards in Canada that enable jurisdictions to compare injuries. So we use one of those codes and the fact that the claimant received at least 4 weeks of wage loss, or we use one of those codes and the fact that the claimant's health care costs were greater than $2,000. So it's that combination of codes and lost time or health care costs, or the claim is a fatality, is actually a fatal claim. So again, we're using type of injury, source of injury, and nature of injury codes under the NWISP program. So some examples for type of injury codes, we'd be looking at explosions of different types, or fires. There may be forest, brush, or other outdoor fires. That's one of the codes as well. Under source of injury, we would be looking at explosive devices, dynamite, fireworks, and so on. And then under nature of injury, we'd look at codes for fractures amputations, and then there's various cancers as well that we would classify a claim as a serious injury. Okay, I'm going to put it back to John now, and we're going to have some interaction from you as the audience now, and we'll have some poll questions.
So based on the information I just relayed with regard to how serious accidents or injuries are defined by the Occupational Health and Safety Act, I've got some questions here as to 3 scenarios, and if you could please respond with respect to each scenario, identifying if you believe whether the scenario that I'm going to describe meets the criteria of a serious accident that needs to be reported to the OHS Division. So scenario number 1, a worker is found unconscious on a set of stairs at the workplace. So if you could just indicate your answer. We'll just wait another minute or 2 for everybody to get their answer entered. Okay, that appears to be the vast majority of people. So the answer is this scenario would meet the criteria of being a serious reportable accident. The reason being, going back to the situation having the reasonable potential to result in serious injury, disability, or death. Unconsciousness, depending on the cause and the potential outcome or complications associated with unconsciousness, can result in death or serious injury. That's why that one meets the criteria. So once again, that first one is a serious reportable accident. Scenario number 2, a 50-kilogram object falls and nearly hits a worker. So once again, a 50-kilogram or 100-pound object falls and very nearly hits a worker. Okay, that appears to be the majority of people who have responded at this time. Scenario number 2 is also a serious reportable workplace accident. And it's because this accident had a very real possibility of resulting in serious injury to a worker or death of a worker. This is due to the weight of the object. You'd also need to consider the distance that the object fell, but the very fact that the object was 100 kilograms is a key criteria to identify that if it struck the worker could be seriously injured or killed. So scenario number 3. When performing work, a worker suffers a sprained wrist after being struck by a vehicle. So once again, scenario number 3. When performing work, a worker suffers a sprained wrist after being struck by a vehicle. So once again, it appears that the majority of people have responded. For those of you who answered yes, it is a serious reportable accident, you are correct. And once again, the key criteria here is the fact that the worker was injured as a result of being struck by a vehicle. Slightly different circumstances could have easily resulted in the worker being seriously injured or killed as a result of being struck by a vehicle. So we'll just move on now in the presentation to give some further examples of typical serious workplace accidents. These would include a worker falling from a roof, a worker slipping and falling and breaking their arm, whether it be the upper arm or lower arm, a worker suffering a burn that requires medical treatment, a worker suffers an electrical shock, and a worker performing road work and being struck by a vehicle. So when a serious workplace accident is reported to the Occupational Health and Safety Division, the report will be screened primarily by the manager who takes the call, but depending on the nature of the incident, it may also be referred on to one of the various internal sections, whether it be enforcement or health and hygiene, at which point in time another manager may get involved in screening the report along with one or more officers. At that point in time, a determination will be made as to what the response will be. Overwhelmingly, the response will involve an occupational health and safety officer responding to the scene, or soon after the report, making contact with people with responsibility for the work site or the workers in question. As per Section 26, an occupational health and safety officer may require the production of documents, records, or samples, and determine who they may want to speak to in relation to the matter. As identified previously, Section 26, subsection 2 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act requires cooperation. Orders may be issued for violations identified as a result of the officer's involvement in the investigation, which may include stop work orders. And what a stop work order is, for those who are not fully familiar, is that under the authority of Section 27 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, an occupational health and safety officer may order that all or a portion of the workplace is vacated, particular work processes may be stopped, or that use of a tool or appliance may be stopped. What will actually be required will be stipulated in the order in what's known as the 2-wit. So it will be clear what people are required to do, and appropriate documentation will be presented to workplace parties, so everybody's aware of what's expected. When an OHS officer is assigned, upon arrival at the scene, they work to determine critical facts surrounding the accident, who witnessed it, what tools, equipment, or work processes were involved. Those facts will normally be determined through the course of an appropriate scene assessment, which will involve taking recordings, photos, video, measurements, as well as potentially taking or seizing samples for the purpose of further analysis and testing. And as was just explained, the officer may, and quite likely will, issue orders that they feel are necessary to ensure adequate levels of safety are implemented and maintained based on the initial information they've gathered. Through the initial phases of the serious accident response, witnesses will be identified, contact information for them obtained, and they will be spoken to and formal statements obtained. Depending on the circumstances, those statements may be made under caution, which essentially for most people, you know, that is the person may be read their rights, at which point in time they can continue to cooperate but say, no, I'm exercising my right to refuse to say anything. So this process doesn't take away from somebody's rights, but there is still the onus and responsibility to cooperate. Once again, items may be seized and documents may be obtained, taken away for the purposes of review, analysis, or copying, at which point in time they will be returned.
Thank you, John. So we're about 30 minutes into the presentation right now, so just ask that you would just get up from your desk or your table, wherever you're seated, and just have a bit of a stretch. Again, nothing too strenuous that's going to overexert yourself, but just have a change of your position. and get the blood flowing. It gets everybody awake for a few more minutes. Okay, and we will continue on. We're going to start the next section here by launching another poll question. So you've heard a fair bit of information already in the first half an hour. So based on the information that has been presented to this point, have you yourself experienced a serious workplace injury? Okay, just just 1 second now.
There we go.
Here we are. So have you experienced a workplace injury yourself? Okay, the majority of you have voted, and it appears, thankfully, that the majority of you have not experienced a serious workplace injury. So that's great. So we want to look now, kind of put a statistical lens on this next section here, and talk about how we gather and determine serious injury statistics. So when a worker becomes injured, the worker completes the worker's injury report, Form 6. The employer then has to complete Form 7, which is the employer's injury report. The Form 6 would be completed on paper. For the Form 7, employers have the option of completing it on paper, or if they are a registered Connect user, can actually fill it out on our Connect system. So the data, whether coming through Connect or on a paper form, gets entered into the system at WorkplaceNL and then moves through the adjudication process. Accepted claims are then queued to our NWISP clerk, who codes the claims to the NWISP standard. The clerk reviews the documentation that was submitted with the claim, and will code injuries for type of claim, nature of injury, type of accident, source of injury, part of body, and occupation. That data then gets loaded into our data warehouse, and once the criteria that we discussed in a couple slides ago, once that criteria is met for serious injury, claims are then flagged as serious injury, and this allows us to do some analysis and reporting of serious injury. So we have another poll question, again, just to get you engaged. So we're going to look at some statistics in a moment, but before we do you think that serious injuries are increasing in the workplace? Okay, we see that the majority of people have responded. So there was actually 74% of those who responded said no, they don't think serious injuries are increasing. So we're going to look at some statistics. So I just want to point out as well that the statistics that I'm going to be presenting this morning take us up to 2015. Our statistics for 2016 are currently preliminary, and they won't actually get finalized until April. So these are the most current statistics that we have at this point. So there have been some fluctuations in the serious incidence rate since 2003. We did reach a high of 11.6 per 10,000 employees in 2011, and again in 2015. So if you look at the serious injury incidence rate, it has been increasing. So we are seeing more serious injuries occurring in the workplace. This just gives you the number of serious injury claims by year, and you notice that it, roughly in the last number of years been around mid 200s. However, over the last 3 years, it's been slowly creeping up. So if you're an employer and you're wondering whether any of the claims for your firm are considered serious injury based on the WorkplaceNL definition, an authorized person from the firm may request that information. This knowledge could help employers and workers focus on their own occupational health and safety program and the development of the program to help prevent these types of injuries in the future. Fatalities, of course, is considered a serious injury. This graphic shows the breakdown of fatalities due to accidents and due to occupational disease. So when we consider occupational disease fatalities, approximately 88% of those fatalities occurred in mining, oil and gas, construction, service, and manufacturing industries. And of the accident fatalities depicted here, 84% have occurred in construction, service, fish harvesting, and transportation and storage industries. So if we look at the breakdown by industry, you notice that in the period 2000 to 2015, service and construction industries both have about 21% of all serious injury claims. These industries tend to have higher volumes of workers who tend to perform higher risk work, such as working at heights or working around equipment. Just a note here that in 2015, the construction industry employed about 10% of all workers in Newfoundland and Labrador, and the service industry employed about 37% of all workers in the province. So if we look at the occupations where we're seeing high rates of serious injury, you'll notice that construction, trades, helpers and laborers, carpenters, and truck drivers, all three are at the bottom, they account for nearly 18%. So the risk is a little higher if you're in one of those occupations. Types of accidents, you'll notice that falls of any sort, so we have fall from scaffold, fall on ship, fall from non-moving vehicle, fall from ladder, fall to floor, walkway, or other surface. All these falls make up approximately 34% of the top 10 types of accidents. So falls are definitely an issue that we have. In terms of nature of injury, you notice that fractures make up the bulk of the nature of injuries that we're seeing in serious injury. Okay, we are currently developing a serious injury fact sheet, and this will be available later in the spring on our website. So just keep checking back. It may be sometime in April or May that this will be available. So this will be a great source of information and will provide us a summary of some of the things that we've talked about here in today's webinar. So, who's affected by serious injury? Most often we think of, the workers and the employers, but there are other players, that we have to consider as well. Employers, families, co-workers, and community are all affected, as well as the injured worker who's injured on the job. The goal of OHS is not only to prevent workplace accidents and diseases, but to understand the link between worker health and safety and the workplace, the environment, and the community. So workers have some direct impacts, of course. There's pain and suffering associated with injuries and disease. There may be loss of income. A serious injury may mean possible job loss and future wage earning capacity. There may be additional health care costs to the worker, and there may be impacts to non-work activities, such as to sports teams if the worker is a member of a team. There are often impacts on family life, and sometimes there's a disconnect for the injured worker from work and from their co-workers. Employers are also impacted. Sometimes there may be some decrease in worker productivity and product quality. Costs associated with repairing or replacing tools, equipment, and machinery are sometimes an issue. There may be negative impact on a company's reputation due to a serious injury, especially if it's something that's publicized in the media. There may as well be deterioration of worker morale, and the confidence in the employer's commitment to occupational health and safety may be affected. There are often costs associated with training other workers, and other workers may have to take on some duties of the injured worker. There could be costs associated with hiring new workers to replace the injured worker. And there may be fines and or penalties that are associated with the serious injury. Families are affected as well. So families may be affected by a loss of income. Sometimes there may be additional stress put on family, whether through loss of income or through just a change in the family dynamics. There may be additional care of the injured worker required, and it could result in increased responsibilities of family members. Johnny may have to take out the garbage now rather than Dad on a Friday morning. There are also impacts for co-workers. Sometimes serious injury may result in lower morale among co-workers who are not injured. Again, co-workers may need to take on additional work and responsibilities, and it may result in heightened safety concerns that co-workers have about their job and their employer. And finally, the community is also impacted in a lot of cases. Team sports may be impacted if the injured worker is a player or a coach. There may be impacts for municipalities or provincial responsibilities. For example, if the injured worker is serving on a town council, there may be some impacts. And volunteer activities such as church groups, food banks, and so on may be impacted if the injured worker is unable to continue the duties that they've been volunteering in.
Okay, so.
Okay, I just had a note there that that the sound is being distorted, so we're just going to try to correct that here. Okay, so how do we use these statistics in helping to prevent serious injury? Statistics are used to determine what injuries are happening, how they happen, the types of accidents, parts of body being injured, and the industries and occupations where they occur. So we use that information to develop publications that raise general awareness of serious injury and highlight areas of concern and identify where focus may be shifted in order to prevent injury. So we, may develop publications such as fact sheets, posters, hazard alerts. And you'll notice there on your screen that we have an example of one of our injury hotspots that we've developed for construction laborer. Workshops are also part of the prevention workshop series, are used to address areas of high concern in response to what statistics tell us. And if you want to see a full list of our workshops and webinars for 2017, if you just visit our website, you can find a complete list there, and you're able to register for those. And again, these are all free. As well, programs may be developed based on what statistics tell us. Programs can target specific areas of concern in terms of serious injury. An example of that would be the fall protection certification training standard that was developed to address falls from heights. So we are going to welcome Deanne Feltham-Scott to the microphone, and she's going to take us through the rest of the webinar this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jamie and John. I will just continue now with some of the OHS initiatives that employers and supervisors and workers can participate in the workplace to prevent serious injuries. So the primary goal of OHS, as well as OHS legislation, is to eliminate hazards or reduce risk to workers, thus preventing injury and illness. We have to put measures in place to prevent all injuries and occupational diseases. However, any workplace condition that places workers at high risk for serious injuries or worse must be prioritized. Generally speaking, the higher the risk of serious injury, the greater the need for specific policies, procedures, and other practices for eliminating the hazard and reducing the risk for workers. The best way to prevent serious injuries is to establish an OHS program or some kind of system that manages your workplace health and safety. An OHS program is essentially an employer's action plan to how they will prevent workplace injuries and occupational diseases. Not all employers are required to have an OHS program according to OHS legislation. But that shouldn't stop any employer from developing and implementing this program. Remember, employers are encouraged to move beyond their legislative requirements and strive for best practice to protect the health and safety and welfare of workers. So how do we do this and prevent serious injuries? It's simple. The first step that you take in preventing injuries and occupational disease is, at a minimum, develop and implement processes for hazard recognition, evaluation, and control, supervision, communication, education and training, as well as workplace inspections. Generally speaking, what the OHS Division, as well as prevention services, have found that workplaces where serious injuries often occur do not properly identify and control workplace hazards, doesn't provide adequate supervision, effectively communicate with workers, or provide education and training in their specific workplace training needs, as well as they don't regularly inspect workplaces, the tools, the equipment, and the machinery. So, hazards that may cause serious injuries must be identified. Once the hazard is identified, the employer is then required to evaluate the risk to workers and put controls in place to eliminate or minimize the risk to the workers. The hierarchy of controls, which you see on the slide, this is just a list of ways that employers can deal with or fix workplace hazards. The options at the top of the list, the elimination, substitution, engineering, are the most effective because they focus on the hazard, the source of the hazard itself, the thing that can cause the harm, rather than just reduce the risk, the harm that the hazard could cause. Engineering controls, they look at the design and modifications to plants, equipment, ventilation systems, and processes that reduce the risk of injury to workers. Administrative controls, that really looks at the way that workers do their work. Examples of administration controls are safe work practices and procedures, education and training, job rotation, scheduling workers in shorter increments to reduce their exposure time to a hazard, as well as medical surveillance and signage and labels. PPE is worn by the worker when they are exposed to a hazard, such as chemicals or noise. Some examples of PPE include steel-toe boots, hard hats, gloves, eyewear, hearing protection. The thing that you have to remember about PPE is that the hazard itself is still in the workplace. If the PPE were to fail, then the worker is fully exposed to that hazard, which may cause serious injuries. Supervisors are the employer's representative in a workplace. They need to understand their role in OHS legislation. It's important that supervisors lead by example and not just by words, by inspiring and motivating their workers to work in a safe manner. In addition to notifying workers of hazards, supervisors are also responsible to provide instruction to workers regarding precautions and ensure workers are using equipment, devices, apparel as they were instructed. Supervisors really need their adequate education and training in their roles and responsibilities. They're a crucial link between the information and the training workers receive and the way that the workers actually perform their work. WorkplaceNL, we're in the process now of developing a voluntary training standard for supervisors in health and safety. Look for more information to be coming within the next, by the end of the spring for sure. And basically what the Supervisors Health and Safety Training Standard is a training program for supervisors to help them understand their roles in occupational health and safety. We will be approving training providers specifically to deliver the supervisor health and safety training, just as we approve training providers in the rest of our training standards. So communication. Information regarding the safe operation of tools, equipment, machinery, hazardous products, and anything that may become a potential hazard to workers. Workers need to know, and this information must be communicated in a way that is understandable to them. Supervisors play a critical role in communicating OHS information to workers. Workers who are not aware of critical information and are not able to make informed decisions put themselves and others at risk. There's various ways that you can communicate OHS in the workplace. One way is through formal education and training sessions. There's also some more informal ways, such as regular toolbox meetings, safety minutes, OHS forums, OHS committee meeting minutes, making OHS a standing item on regular staff meetings, as well as hazard alerts and reporting. Employers are required, as we learned on a previous slide, they're required to give workers operating instructions in the use of devices and equipment that has been provided for their protection. Education and training needs, remember, it's based on the individual needs of a workplace. Every workplace is different because every workplace has different hazards, different tools, equipment, processes. Therefore, the education and training between workplaces will be different. Going back to the information on the supervisor slide, supervisors play key roles in education and training. Therefore, they're required to be well trained. Some examples of education and training include the basic rights of workers, roles and responsibilities, incident and injury reporting, the work inspection process, hazard recognition, evaluation, and control procedures, emergency preparedness and response planning, safe work practices and procedures, as well as hazard-specific or workplace-specific training. Employers are also required to conduct regular inspections of the workplace. That includes buildings, excavations, structures, machinery, equipment, work practices, and places of employment. Inspections can be formal. They can also be informal or practice awareness. Pre-use inspections, required maintenance schedules as per OHS legislation or CSA standards. Regular workplace inspections are documented by the employer, and one of the reasons why that we document them is because they play an important role in recognizing, evaluating, and controlling workplace hazards that may lead to serious injury. Workplace inspections also allows us to listen to the concerns of the supervisors and workers who are actually working in that particular job task or work activity. It helps us to gain further knowledge and understanding of the job itself and the tools and the equipment that is used in that job. Helps us to identify existing and potential health and safety hazards, as well as by talking to the workers who work in the area. It can help us determine underlying causes of some of the health and safety hazards that are faced by the workers. It also helps us monitor any controls that we have put in place as a result of regular hazard recognition, evaluation, and control activities. And just to refresh your memory, the hazard controls, again, are engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE. Workplace inspections also provide us a way of recommending any corrective actions that need to be taken to make the jobs and job tasks easier. Just one more slide for me, and then we're going to take our micro break, and I'm going to hand it back over to Jamie. So today we brought together the education and enforcement side of OHS. So I work in prevention services, of course, here at WorkplaceNL. An important part of our mandate in the department is to promote health and safety in order to prevent and reduce workplace injuries and illnesses. We work to foster commitment to OHS among employers, workers, and others by promoting public awareness of OHS issues. We educate employers and workers and others as well about workplace health and safety. We partner with industry associations, government departments such as the OHS Division in ServiceNL, unions, and health and safety organizations across the province to help with the goal of reducing workplace injuries and illnesses. So John Morgan, as you know, John works in the OHS Division. The primary goal of the division is accident and illness prevention, no different than what we are here in prevention. OHS Division recognizes that all workers have a fundamental right to a workplace that neither impairs their health nor imperils their safety. This is achieved by the OHS consultant like John and the OHS officers by working with the stakeholders to establish, promote, and enforce workplace practices, standards, and procedures. So we do have different roles in OHS, but at the end of the day, both departments, we all share the same goal of helping employers and workers create healthy and safe workplaces in our province. So we're going to get up now and have a little stretch. get your legs moving, get the blood flowing through your veins, and get some of those cricks and cracks and knots out. So I will hand it back over to Jamie.
Thank you, Deanne. Okay, now you've all had your stretch. We just want to sum up what we've presented here today. So, over the course of the past hour, we've looked at legislation and the role of OHS Division in serious injury. We've looked at the definition of serious injury by both OHS Division and WorkplaceNL. We took some time and we looked at some serious injury statistics. We talked about who has been impacted by serious injury. And then we went through education and training and how that's used to prevent serious injury. I just want to promote some of our upcoming workshops and webinars. So we have another webinar early April, April 5th, on safety documentation and keeping your records. Beginning today, for the month of March, we have a workshop on prolonged sitting and MSI controls. So that is actually starting today, and that goes through the month. So again, check our website for those sessions. And in April, we will be doing another workshop on assessing the risk of workplace violence. So again, check out our website and check out the dates. We offer a number of dates each month throughout the province. So go in and register, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed. If you want to get up-to-date information about our free workshops and webinars, please subscribe and you will be on our mailing list, and you will certainly be notified of what's coming up. Your feedback is certainly important to us. So once we're finished up here, I'd ask that you take the time to provide some feedback and to certainly let us know what you thought of the presentation this morning, and as well give us some input into other topics that you would like to see. So before we sign off, we do certainly want to say thank you for being with us today, but we want to take a couple minutes. We still have some time left, so if you have any specific questions that you would like to present to us now, you can certainly type those in, and we will see if we can help you with those questions. So we do have one here, and I'm not sure, John, if you might be able to help with this one. What type of reporting occurs from social workers?
At this point in time, I wouldn't be able to provide any statistics applicable to reports by any one group of workers. That's something that if you want, we can look into that and try to provide an email response back to you.
We have another question here regarding assaults occurring on the job. Since this is a serious injury workshop, we don't have those stats in front of us, but if you look at the workshop for April and register for that one, you may possibly get some statistics there. If you want anything specific, certainly contact us and we can provide you with some specifics. Is the increase in numbers for serious injury possibly due to an increase in the number of reported incidents versus incidents that go unreported?
There has been some analysis of the numbers. I can't speak to the analysis that has been done by WorkplaceNL, but I will speak to analysis done within our own division. This is John, by the way, with Occupational Health and Safety Division speaking. We've tried to adjust those numbers based on employment levels in the province. We've also tried to look at those numbers from a trending perspective to see if it is due to reporting. We have not been able to make any firm conclusions, or draw any firm conclusions, I should say. However, even when we look at the numbers adjusted for employment levels at this time, we see that things are increasing slightly. It can be argued that part of that can be attributed to increased knowledge of the requirement to report. But if that is the case, we're also well aware of many incidents that we find out about by chance that we're still not getting a truly accurate picture of the total number of accidents that occur that meet the criteria of a serious reportable accident. So the best conclusion we can draw is that the trends we're seeing are fairly representative of what's actually occurring out there. If anything, it might actually be underreporting to a minor extent.
Okay, are there any other questions? I apologize if we've missed any, but we've had quite a bit of interaction over the last hour or so. So there's a lot of comments, so we may have missed something there. John, this question is for you. It says, could you give more context or examples of the near-miss type incidents that are reportable?
The best thing that I can say is look at Section 54.1. You have to do your own internal evaluation of a situation to determine if that matter reasonably had the potential to result in serious injury, disability, or death. If your own internal evaluation determines that that near miss, under slightly different circumstances, could have resulted in a serious injury or accident as defined by the legislation, or in possible death of a worker, then it should be reported. And as I said before, if you're in a situation where you don't think it's clear, it doesn't hurt to call and report and discuss the matter with one of our managers that staffs the accident report line. They will assist you to quickly come to a determination in the vast majority of cases if it does meet the criteria or not. So do your own internal evaluation, but err on the side of caution, and if in doubt, call.
Okay, that seems to be the end. If you do need to contact us, certainly contact one of our 3 offices, and we will be happy to try to help you in any way we can. Again, thank you for joining us today. We've certainly, had some great feedback from the many of you who have joined us, and we just wish you a safe day, and we'll be signing out. Thank you.